Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to the Value Stream Identification webinar presented by BMA. My name is Nick Katko, Senior Consultant with BMA. Before we get started with the webinar, here's a few housekeeping items. First of all, on your control panel on the right, you will see a handout section. And if you would like to download a copy of the handout, please go there. And secondly, can you see me and can you hear me? If you can, please, one of you or a few of you, just type a yes in the chat box. And if you cannot hear me or see me, please let me know. And I'll wait a second. Great. Okay. One more housekeeping item is that if you have a question, please, during the webinar, please type the question in the question panel. And at the end of the webinar, I'll leave some time to review the questions and answer them. We'll get through as many questions as possible. And I think that's all the housekeeping, so we will get started. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about value streams and how value streams are very important and fundamental to an overall lean strategy. We're going to talk about and explain the standard work behind identifying value streams. Talk about a few cultural issues to recognize inside any organization when it comes to value stream identification. Then we'll have a wrap up and questions. I have over 20 years of experience helping companies identify value streams, both in manufacturing organizations and service organizations, healthcare. And over the years, what I've learned, and really what I want to share with you today, is that this is really an organizational learning process. Typically, when you begin value stream identification, the organization has never done this before. Now, some people inside the organization may have done it, but overall, the organization is going through a new experience. So it's very important, and I'm going to emphasize this throughout the webinar, that you look at this as a organizational learning experience. What I'm going to do today is explain the process, how you actually do value stream identification. I'll also talk about some of the issues to avoid and problems that may occur in the process, and give you practical advice as to how to prevent some typical problems that occur during the value stream identification process. The concept of a value stream is foundational to lean and fundamental to lean. It's actually principle number 2 of the 5 principles of lean, but really value streams are in all 5 principles of lean. So the first principle of lean, customer value. What a value stream really is are the process steps that are needed to create the value for the customer. Value streams really become the primary unit of organization in a lean business. Not departments, not business units, but value streams. The third principle of lean, flow and pull. The concept of understanding your value streams is ultimately to flow orders through your value stream as fast as possible. In terms of pursuing perfection, we want to improve at the value stream level and optimize value stream performance. And the fifth principle of lean, empowered employees. We want to develop strong value stream teams in order to manage and control and operate the value stream. Value stream identification is also the first step in creating a value stream management system. After you have defined your value streams, what lean companies do is they begin controlling at the value stream level. How do we manage value stream operations for the benefit of the customer? We also improve at the value stream level. We're trying to achieve end-to-end value stream improvement to flow orders faster and deliver value better to our customers. From a planning viewpoint, we want to plan strategically and operationally at value stream level. And finally, we want to be able managing the value stream team. We want a strong value stream team to manage all aspects of value stream performance. One way to think about a value stream is it's a self-contained business inside your larger business. And that's the way we want to organize it, and that's why it's important to identify your value streams. So exactly what is the definition of a value stream? The Lean Enterprise Institute, and that the website is lei.org. That's the organization that was started by Jim Womack, Dan Jones, John Shook, who really are the founders of the lean movement in the United States. They define a value stream very, very simply. It's the actions taken in the proper sequence at the proper time to create the value for a customer. And it also includes the information necessary to coordinate all these actions. The benefit of understanding your value streams and identifying your value streams is it focuses the organization on optimization of servicing your customers, as opposed to a departmental structure which pretty much optimizes departments and not the whole customer experience. So when it comes to defining and identifying your value streams, as I said earlier, remember you as an organization have never done this before. So it's very important to understand certain aspects. First of all, standard work. Value stream identification is a logical, rational exercise. There's plenty of standard work out there in terms of books and experts as to how you go about doing this. And actually, that's what I'm going to explain is the standard work behind value stream identification. It's very important for any organization that's beginning the value stream identification process to recognize that other companies have done this successfully. So you don't have to literally reinvent the wheel. You can follow this standard work that's out there. A big part of value stream identification is achieving consensus. This is done through direct observation of the value streams. Going to the Gemba, whether it's a factory floor or if it's in a service business, walking through the business and understanding what your value streams are. What you want to avoid here is a mentality of I think or we think. I think these are our value streams, or we think these are our value streams. You don't want to sit around in a conference room and sort of brainstorm this out. This is about going out there and actually physically walking the value streams. So here's a little bit of practical advice. in terms of what to avoid. Avoid pulling rank. And what I mean by this is whether it's the senior leadership team or other people in the organization who have some level of authority, is that they don't they pull rank and say these are our value streams, or after you have a team go through the value stream identification exercise, they come in and say no, that's not right. The second point is to avoid telling yourselves as an organization that we know our value streams. If you did, you wouldn't have to go through this exercise. If you really knew your value streams, you'd already be organized and managing by value streams. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have some ideas of what your value stream are, but avoid the certainty of saying we know this already. The final piece of practical advice is maintaining the status quo. There's a tendency to sort of rationalize what your value streams are based on your current departmental structure, your organizational structure, or your management structure. And you want to avoid sort of the going back to that and just saying, well, that's the way it is. So these 3 points of practical advice I have seen in companies that I've worked with in terms of value stream identification. So I wanted to point these things out at this point in time. The best place to start in terms of identifying your value streams is an order fulfillment value stream definition. The true value streams of any organization really start with your suppliers and end up at your customers. But that's really a large task to try to identify when you're beginning the process. So it's really best to start with order fulfillment. So this is the idea that we want to identify the value streams from the receipt of the order to the shipment of the product or delivery of the service. So you begin this process by identifying your product families or your service families that have similar production flow. And I'd like to point out right here, if you are a service organization, you still have a production process in terms of delivering the services. So please don't take the term production flow to mean only manufacturing. The idea behind value stream identification, another good concept, is staple yourself to an order. What I mean by that is follow the path of a customer's order from the receipt of the order through the business to the delivery. And follow and understand how that order gets transformed into actions in terms of either producing a product or delivering a service. We want to flow the entire sequence of process steps. So we need to know the steps which create value and the sequence in which they must occur. And finally, we want to identify monuments. Monuments are shared resources between value streams. Just about every business has monuments. We don't have to be, when we go through the value stream identification process, it's really just important to identify the monuments. We really don't have to spend much time on what we do about monuments. That's a separate issue that's involved in the overall lean strategy. So I'm just going to take a quick break right now, make sure that there's no technical difficulties. I'm going to look at the question panel, and everything seems to be fine. So we'll continue. So now we're going to get into the actual standard work to identify the value stream. And there's 5 topics here. First is the Kaizen approach. Second is determining the number of value streams that you have in your organization. The third step is actually the observation and mapping the process. Fourth is how do we achieve consensus through a second observation? And finally, reporting out and achieving organizational consensus. If you follow the standard work for value stream identification, you will be successful. What I've found over the years is that organizations that want to sort of cut corners or do it their way rather than the standard way, they're the ones who end up with problems and issues in terms of value stream identification. The Kaizen approach. If you have any familiarity with Lean, you know about Kaizen, which is the process of it's the standard work to make improvements, whether it's a major improvement or a small improvement. And we have to think of value stream identification as something major in the organization. So there are 5 steps that you want to follow in terms of creating a Kaizen event to do your value stream identification. Number 1, and I'm going to go into details on these. Number 1 is leadership support. Second is identifying and creating a strong cross-functional team to do the work. The third is follow the standard work. The fourth is to schedule an event. And this event is like any other Kaizen event, maybe 1 to 3 days, depending on your organization and number of value streams. It might be maybe 5 days. But the idea is you schedule this event, you get the team is dedicated for the entire schedule to completing the value stream identification process. So we minimize interruptions, people have to clear their schedules, they have to be 100% committed for the time frame to do the value stream identification. And fifth, we complete this in the time frame. It's not something that we get halfway through and then we say, well, we'll pick it up next week or we'll pick it up in 2 weeks. We want to start and finish this in a very short time frame so that we can move on to the next steps in the Lean strategy. So leadership team support, which is fundamental to Lean in general. The leadership team of the organization needs to understand that value stream identification is fundamental to the overall Lean strategy. And it must be done early in the whole Lean transformation process. The team that will be doing value stream identification, maybe it's multiple teams in a larger organization, has to be assigned and sanctioned by the leadership team. They have the authority and the responsibility for performing value stream identification. And finally, and this is very, very important, is that the leadership team supports the process and the outcome. The team will do the work, present their findings, not necessarily for approval, but for consensus. This is not, value stream identification is not something that the senior leadership team says, yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong. In fact, I would recommend that if senior leaders have strong opinions about what the value streams are in your organization, that you put some of them on the team so that they can participate in that. Your value stream identification team should be made up of people who work in the value streams, whether maybe they're managers, but they have familiarity with the process, whether it's a production process or a service creation process. You also want a few people that support the value streams. So in manufacturing, for example, you have maintenance and engineering and quality, and they support the value stream production process. And in a service business, you may have some support function. So you want some representative members on that. You also want fresh eyes. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Kaizen approach to improvement, fresh eyes are outside people that really they don't work in the value stream, they don't support the value stream, but you bring in fresh eyes to get an objective, rational view of things. And it's good to have a few fresh eyes on the team. Fourth, you want a facilitator with experience. This is critical because, again, as an organization, you've never done value stream identification. Now, individuals within the organization may have done this before, maybe in previous jobs. So the leader, and this is a facilitator, you want someone with experience, whether it's an internal person or you might bring in some outside expert. The ideal size team, 6 to 8 people. You probably don't want to get larger than that, because you get larger than that, then it's just too cumbersome. And most Kaizen events have about 6 to 8 people on them. So identify the team after you get leadership support. So how many value streams do you have? In the course of my work over the years, this has always been a very interesting question. And I get asked, and it's really, until you go out on the floor, you may not really understand it. Until you really go into the business, you may not understand it. So you really want to let the value stream identification process decide. But there are a few guidelines which are good to know. So first of all, in terms of flow, you want to look at families of products or services that have similar production flow. So if you look at your families of products or your family of services and you see similarities, that's sort of a good indicator of what your value streams may be. But don't say for certain that's what they are until you do the direct observation. We're also looking at resources. And what I mean by that, these are the people and or the machines that perform the process step activities. So really what you're doing is it's sort of like a multi-dimensional view. You have the flow of orders, you have the flow of the work through unique resources. And it's really a 3-dimensional type view that you want. So it's pretty good to brainstorm this at the beginning. And there are some general rules of thumb. Value streams typically have maybe 25 to 150 people. Rarely do they have like 3 or 4 people. Likewise, value streams typically don't have like 500 people in them either. If you look at your revenue as related to maybe your product families or services, typically value streams have maybe 10 to 25% of revenue. These sort of, when you get below 10%, it's really not, first of all, it's not significant business. And if you get into the 60, 70% range, well, it is possible you may only have one value stream. But again, these are just general rules of thumb. Typically what you find, there's no more than 4 or 5 value streams per location in a business, whether it's a factory or an office. That's typically about where you end up. Now, if you have a complex business and or you're stuck in getting an idea of how many value streams you have, there's this exercise called a product process matrix. And you can do this on a spreadsheet. In fact, we have an Excel spreadsheet with macros in it that does the sorting for you, which, by the way, if you end up ever wanting to use it, it's free of charge and be glad to send it to you. So the product process matrix is the columns on the top are the process steps, and the rows on the left are the different product families. And this is an exercise you can do even before you go out and do the observation, is you sort of just put an X in the process steps that each product family or service family goes through. And then you can do multiple sorts. And in this example, after the multiple sorts, you get an idea of what your product families are based on the unique resources that the products flow through. So this is an example of a way to unstick yourself if you're not sure about the number of value streams. So now let's talk about the actual observation and the mapping process. And as I said earlier, this is a requirement to do the physical observation of the process. And don't fall into the trap of avoiding it. So we're going to observe the process actually 2 times, not 1. And as I said earlier, this is a learning exercise designed to achieve consensus. So we're focusing on the way that the team is thinking about this, and we want to get consensus on thinking. So this might seem a little odd, but the best way to do the first observation is to walk the process backwards. For example, in a factory, you would start from when the products are delivered to the warehouse and walk backwards through the step. If you're talking about a service, you would talk about when the service is delivered and walk backwards. And what you're trying to do here is document the product and the service flow through the unique resources. The reason it's good to walk backwards is because you start earlier when you're talking about value streams as the product families and service or service families. So you have that in your mind. And so you're actually deconstructing the assembly of the product, or you're deconstructing the development of the service. And it's a little easier to understand because you begin to see how things flow differently. After you have walked the process, and when you walk the process, you want the people to have maybe notebooks and pencils and pens so they can make notes, they can draw things as they are. Don't worry too much about the formality of the note taking, but make sure that the team has something to write down their thoughts. After you've completed the walk, you want to map the process. So the idea would be to have a conference room with a wall. How large of a wall you need depends on how complex your business is. But you want to post the process steps visually on a wall. Post-it notes are highly recommended, where you write the name of the process step and you put the sequence at which these steps occur. And this is really an exercise to discuss and achieve consensus. And you want to make sure you have them in the right sequence. You also want to make sure that everyone agrees that these are the steps. And you can do it. It's not very formal in terms of using the post-it notes. Just get them up there. You want to make them visual so that everybody sees things. Likewise, in a Kaizen event, which is all about achieving consensus, you want to make sure that everyone on the team has a chance to talk, express their thoughts and their thinking. If there's any kind of disagreement, we want to resolve any disagreements and achieve consensus. That's really what the facilitator does, and that's why you want someone with experience. We're not too concerned about waste in this exercise. We're just concerned about what are the steps that are required to create the value. The true value stream mapping exercise, which is another whole tool of Lean, is about identifying the waste. Here's a note about service processes. If you are mapping a service process, it's usually necessary to talk to the people doing the work in addition to observation. The reason I bring this up is because a lot of service work is done maybe on computers. Maybe it's information. You don't actually see a service till it's actually delivered. So you want to talk to the people to understand what they do so you can map it, especially if the work is hidden. When you're walking a factory floor, you can see the product and you can see the breakdown of the product and the resources. So we observed the process the first time. Now we want to get into a second observation, and you might take a little break. For example, maybe in the morning you finish the first observation, you have lunch, and you finish the first observation, and you post the process on the wall. You take a lunch break. You're going to go do the second process, or maybe it's the next day. So this time you're going to walk forwards, which means you're going to start at the beginning of the process and follow it to the end. So this is really to get confirmation that what you put on the wall is what you think it is. Because again, people's minds change. And you might have thought of a certain process step one way. You go out there again, you see it's a little bit different than what you thought. So you're following the same standard work, walking the process, and confirming that what you put on the wall is really what is happening. If necessary, you come back, you make adjustments to your process map, and you achieve consensus. So the idea here is that the team must agree and finalize the process steps. As I mentioned earlier, don't be too concerned about improvements at this time. Then from here, you can actually do a formal report out to senior leaders, to other parts of the organization. Here are our value streams. If you have a larger company, start small. Pick one location and do the value streams for that location. The great part about that is the people who are on the team, they get the experience, and then they would be able to help in other locations as facilitators. So here's some practical advice about the actual observation process. And this practical advice comes from a lot of real life experiences that I've had in terms of helping companies do value stream identification. There's always a lot of questions about the sales function and sort of order entry or customer support, whatever you want to call it. Typically, sales and order entry functions are organized with a customer focus. For example, a customer talks to one salesperson. You typically don't want a customer talking to multiple salespeople. And even the order entry, you might have, certain products go to certain order entry specialists, or maybe all your order entry people are generalists, and the first whoever can answer the phone or take the order processes the order. So my recommendation is when you're doing your initial value stream identification, don't really focus on sales and order entry unless they have specific functions that are unique to a product or service that would be necessary to try to flow very early in the lean journey. Likewise, at the other end of the process, especially in manufacturing, if you're talking about shipping and or the warehouse process, that's typically organized to get the product out the door, minimize logistical costs, maximize loads and things like that. And you typically want to typically you don't want to do that in the initial value stream identification. Of course, unless there's something unique to a specific product family or service family. If you have any kind of customization, for example, design or engineering, if design or engineering is specific to, if it's specific to one or more product families or services, include that in the identification process because you probably want to flow that. If it's sort of general, then again, you might be able to exclude it and begin after the design is done. It's really important here to use a lot of common sense. We're trying to identify the value stream for many, many reasons. One is ultimately to flow. And so, what processes really need to be coordinated to flow from order receipt to delivery? So this is, even though I said value stream identification is a rational exercise, there's a bit of subjectivity here when you get into these functions. And you need to decide early whether to include or exclude. So you can exclude and identify a smaller portion of order fulfillment value stream. You can then add these in later. There's no sort of hard, fast rule that you have to do end to end at the beginning. But again, use some common sense and some logic and do what's practical for you. So that takes care of the standard work. Now let's move on to cultural issues. And there's really one primary cultural issue that you have to deal with, and that is your existing departmental organizational structure. Whether it's the company as a whole, whether it's leadership, whether it's managers, when you start talking about value streams, you're really touching on the organizational structure, the influences of power and decision making and leadership, and quite frankly, organizational politics. Because value streams run horizontally from order receipt to delivery through an organization. They're not vertical. And so I've noticed over the years that there's a lot of maybe anxiety about, well, what does this mean to the organization? And the best thing to do is to really emphasize that it's not about restructuring the company. It's not about managers not managing anymore or being quote unquote demoted, even though they might not be demoted, they might think they're being demoted. Remember, the lean principle, value streams, they're the primary unit of organization. So this is something that you don't want to impede identification of value streams. And it's very important to just talk about, what are we doing? We're just identifying our value streams. We're not changing the organization around. If you have any issues, here's some of the reasons you have to look at your departmental structure and value streams. Departments impede flow, improving flow. Departments prevent end-to-end breakthrough improvement across the value stream. Departmental barriers have a tendency to prevent cooperation between departments. And finally, customer value. The coordinated sequence of process steps creates value, not individual departments. The purpose of value stream organization is to serve our customers better. We want to eventually, through our overall lean transformation, is optimize the value stream performance to serve our customers better. Departments don't do that because departments are rarely coordinated in terms of their work. And the way, whether it's management structure, incentives, or reporting relationships, departmental or functional optimization occurs. So this is important to recognize. And again, you don't have to necessarily do a total reorganization, but you need to recognize that this will probably occur in your organization. So here's some practical advice as we're almost finished here. First of all, training. From a lean strategic viewpoint, you want consistent, fundamental, organizational lean training. Whether it's lean as a business strategy, what lean means, deeper in the organization in terms of operating performance, and also understanding value streams. So before you begin the value stream identification process, you really have to ask yourself as an organization, are we properly trained to begin this? And if not, get the training. Purpose. Value stream identification is one small step in a total lean transformation. And that's why training is important, and the whole sort of lean transformation is important, is that people need to understand, as an organization, everyone needs to understand, where are we in the lean transformation process? Again, many companies have gone through this successfully, and this is just one of the first steps. But what does it mean? What doesn't it mean? Finally, empowerment. We want a proper cross-functional team that will validate the value stream identification process. We don't want to do this by just the senior leaders. We don't want a small group of people getting together deciding these are our value streams. You want to empower a team to go through this process by following the standard work and accept what they recommend. So, just to wrap up here, experience matters. It's best to have someone with experience facilitate the value stream identification process. You want to avoid all the dangers that I talked about earlier of maintaining the status quo or organization thinking they know their value streams. If you have someone with experience, use that person. If you don't have someone with experience, I urge you to go out and get someone with experience to do this work. We want to complete the value stream identification process. We want to avoid endless discussions and second guessing. And also, senior leaders must not invalidate the work that was done by others in the organization. The reason I bring this up is I've seen this before, where I've gone in, I've helped a company identify their value streams, and maybe come back, 4 to 6 weeks later for the next step in the process. And all of a sudden they're saying, well, we changed our mind about what the value streams are, or we think they're different. You want to avoid that because it becomes an endless discussion. And that's where you start getting into opinions and assertions rather than what are the facts. So you want to finalize this. These are our value streams. And again, you can start small from order receipt to delivery. You don't have to go end to end from suppliers all the way to the customers. That can be done later where you can expand your value streams. And finally, one of the first statements that I made is this is about learning. And if you listen to people who have a lot of experience with lean, if you emphasize learning, meaning individuals, teams, and organizations are learning, then the process will work. So value stream identification is really a learning exercise that you're going to take an organization through as one of the initial steps in a lean transformation journey. So that wraps up the presentation. couple slides about BMA, and then I'll open up for questions. There's our website, which has blogs, articles, and books. We actually perform value stream identification, Kaizens, and value stream management. 3-day Kaizen event to identify value streams. We are the facilitators. The value stream management is either a 1 or 2-day training workshop or actually a Kaizen event to create a value stream management system. In fact, Thursday's webinar is going to be about value stream management. We also do lean accounting training workshops, lean accounting assessments, and we actually help companies implement lean accounting. We also do 1 or 2-day public workshops for conferences, industry groups, and lean groups. If you'd like to learn more about BMA, there's our website. There's resources to download. Here's my email address. You please feel free to contact me with any questions that you have, follow up. And here's a few events that are coming up that I'm going to be presenting at. And we also have a BMA LinkedIn group that you are free to join and post and comment and blog. So I'm going to click over here and open up the questions. And I'm going to keep everyone muted. I will read the question, identify the person, and then try to answer. So Richard Hausman has two questions. The first one is, if there is disagreement, who has the final say? The final say, this is going to sound a little strange, the final say is the customer. And what I mean by that is, what are the process steps that are required to create value for the customer? And that's the best way to resolve the disagreement. Richard Hausman's second question is, must consensus be unanimous? I would say yes. I mean, that's the idea behind consensus. Consensus is, this is what we agree on, and we're going to move forward. This idea of it not being unanimous, what that leads to in the long run is sort of backroom discussions, or talking over here, and really silent disagreement. This is not really, if I would even take this one step further. If there's a lot of disagreement about what the value streams are in your business, you probably need to take a step back and go into training. Because again, this is not, it's a logical, rational exercise. And maybe what the problem is that maybe people don't really understand what lean is as a business strategy, and they're diving in too soon. So those were actually the questions. Anybody else have any more questions? All right. Well, we got done a little early. I hope this was beneficial to you. A recording of the webinar will be available. I have to do some work to set up the recording, and then in the email tomorrow that you get from for follow-up, you will have a link to the recording. Please feel free to share the link with anyone in your business or with others. And if you have not attended the webinar, you will also get a copy of the recording. Thank you for attending. Hope to see you soon, and good luck with your value stream identification. Bye-bye.